Good evening. I'm Claremont Featherstone inviting you to Security Focus. This evening, I would like to touch on a few matters, starting with one of an environmental nature. Quite some time now, I've noticed that our garbage collectors are going about their duty without proper protective gears, namely safety boots and gloves. Of course, from time to time a few will have, but for the most part, most of our garbage collectors are handling garbage with their bare hands. And I think we have reached that stage where we should ensure that those people, those workers are protected from the elements which lingers. There is another matter that I would want to touch on immediately, and that has to do with the Assistant Commissioner, Mr. Alves, having spoken out about the force's new plans to engage businesses specifically to aid the force in curbing crime. And there is a particular aspect I would want to touch on because he had a lot to say. But he spoke specifically to the fact that many businesses are using inexpensive equipment for purposes of surveillance. He spoke to the fact that many businesses also are reluctant to cooperate with the police when the police visits them to ask for footage of what perhaps might have transpired during a robbery incident. That is a ticklish matter. Apart from the fact that the cameras have been used for quite some time as a reactive process, in fact, the entire CCTV network, today we can use specialized software that can make it possible that the camera system becomes more reactive rather than proactive. And so perhaps the force could advise the business people, or the business people could ask their professionals, and he did speak to that problem of having professionals analyze and install these cameras. And you can use analytical software to make the entire CCTV system more proactive rather than reactive. With respect to that problem of persons not wanting to cooperate with the police, I think we would need to pass a piece of legislation. And of course, there is a reason why most persons are afraid to cooperate with the police in this regard, because this has happened in other countries as well. But it has to do primarily with the fact that they're afraid of reprisal. They're afraid that if they cooperate and give the police footage, the people who would have committed those crimes would come after them. That is one of the reasons. But there is a way that the police could compel them, as is the case in other countries, and it has to do with drafting a piece of legislation, because the cameras are not picking up only what transpires on their personal property. The camera is also surveilling public space, which they have little or no authority over. And so once they would have obtained footage of that public space, then the Public Safety Authority should have a way to compel them to hand over that footage. But I think some piece of specialized legislation needs to be drafted. And we could look at how other countries, the United Kingdom, South Africa, Nigeria, Brazil, and many other countries, both developed and developing, would have dealt with that phenomenon. I would also like to make mention of the fact that our security companies continue to do what they like, so to speak. Only this morning I saw an incident where a woman was robbed, and from her vantage point, she sincerely thought the person that she was looking at in the distance was a police, and she ran for half of a block into a fellow standing somewhere at the junction of Robb and Orange Walk. And when she was about to approach him, then she discovered that that gentleman is a private security officer in a suit that mimics a specialized unit in the Guyana Police Force. And she had to be close to him, and I had to be closer yet to recognize the monogram, that little emblem on his shirt, which was the only thing that distinguished him as not being a police. I mean, this is going to cause serious problems in our country. I don't know where and when did all of this creep into the society, but that is going to cause us severe problems. In fact, I spoke at length about security companies patrolling public space without an official attestation or some sort of proper agreement with the city that gives them the power to do so. But even so, I have seen some of those very security companies with ballistic protection, camouflage ballistic protection, camouflage pants that they are wearing primarily on weekends. If you go down Regent Street, for example, Robb Street, on Saturdays, Sundays, holidays, you see men with bulletproof jackets that are of the camouflage variety. You see them with camouflage pants and the like. I've been taught as a security practitioner that unless I'm training with the Army, I should not dress like a soldier or behave like a soldier. Unless I am training with the police, I should not dress or behave like a police because I'm not a police officer. And the United Nations have put out a lengthy report with respect to the problems that those practices have caused countries primarily in Africa and South America. And we are not very far from Brazil and Venezuela and the others who have had severe problems with those practices. So I implore the Ministry of Home Affairs and the police to pay keen attention to this new development. When I come back, I will address a few other security-related issues. Stay tuned.
Security Focus is brought to you by Region International, Northwest Investment Inc., Intelligard Specialist Security Services, and the Institute of Security and Public Safety.
Thank you for remaining with us. This morning, I read in the newspaper that the Guyana Energy Agency has had a breach of their bond in its code. Large quantity of fuel which is being seized. So we're talking about evidence for the court has vanished. And I wonder, especially since this is not the first time that the GEA has been compromised in that manner. I believe that procedural security needs to be reinforced at the GA. I believe that they should have some serious work done there and try to beef up their physical security, see what needs to be done, even in the immediate environment, with respect to the training of the people who are responsible for protecting the evidence and the like. I think the agency cannot continue to face the kind of embarrassment that it has faced in the past, this being the umpteenth time, perhaps 3 times as far as I can recall, where technical pieces for forensic evidence has been removed from the premises or places under the control of the energy agency. And I think we ought to pay some attention to that situation. There is a troubling situation that I want to touch on as well, and it has to do with entities in our country that are not adhering to the law or laws of our country. And they are both in the private sector, as in businesses, and NGOs, non-governmental agencies. Some time back, I had occasion to interact with an agency and found out that they were passing official documents gotten from the premises by patrons through the shredding machine. What was troubling in this respect is that whether it was a British passport or a US passport was passed through that device. Whether it was a Guyana passport and Guyana passport did pass through, whether it was a Guyana national ID card, an NIS card, a foreign driver's license, or the foreign birth certificate, which was passed through that device. And I remembered advising two young men who worked in that particular department how to deal with that matter. And I said, if you find a passport, see the US passport, Siemens ID in a particular country, try to get this document to the embassy, nearest embassy or diplomatic representative. Some embassies represent not only their nationals, but nationals from other jurisdictions. And I said, put the Guyana IDs and the national insurance IDs here. And I will call someone to pick it up. And in future, this is how you will deal with these matters. And no sooner had I turned my back, came back for 10 minutes after making contact with the person, and I said, well, let me have those documents. And he says, well, I've already passed it through Shredder. I said, why are you so stupid? I told you not to do that. It is improper so to do. And I had to take that a little higher because I found out that the business had a good relationship with a senior government official. And so I went to his office and I said to his senior aide, look, we cannot tolerate this any longer. I want you to tell your boss that XYZ is referring at his friend's business, and I want him to ask him to desist from his practice. And the senior aide spoke with his boss, and the boss told him to thank me for informing him of what was going on. And so that has to do with a business for some unexplained reason not adhering, not following the laws of the country. But we have those problems as well in the NGO sector, and we have had those problems there for quite some time. Now, persons may or may not know that if you have an NGO and it is not registered under the laws of the land, for every day that the NGO remains unregistered, there is a piece of legislation that empowers the government or a particular arm of government to prosecute them, and they would pay a fine for every day that they would have operated not being a registered entity. Having dealt with that, NGOs, as I know it, are supposed to be registered someplace. Some of them may choose to be registered at the court, deeds registry. Others may choose to use the cheaper route or one which best suits them under the Friendly Societies Act. And that act, as far as I recall, provides about 4 or 5 categories which you can register a business. And so even the new building society is supposed to be registered there. There is a particular department that is tasked with governing and supervising NGOs, particularly those that are registered under Chapter 36:04 of the laws of Guyana. So there is a way that we can control NGOs. But we have lots of NGOs in our country that are doing what they like, just like some of the businesses. So we have NGOs, and we've had this for quite some time, NGOs misrepresenting. So I recall doing an investigation about 20 years ago, and there was an NGO bought duty-free concession for 3 or 4 vehicles to set up some ambulance service. But that NGO, I'm told, instead attempted to set up a funeral parlor and was about to use those vehicles to that end. Then I am told that there are NGOs or entities masquerading as NGOs that are having security companies, and this company has arms. However they got it, I don't know. They are NGOs and entities masquerading as NGOs. Some under the Friendly Societies are doing all sorts of things in Guyana. There was a situation only recently where a woman rescued an NGO, gave them a place to operate under her house, and in no time, the gentleman took over the building and sold it for $66 million. The woman died a couple of months after. Then we have misrepresentation going on in NGOs. Letters being sent out. In fact, we have lots of people walking around with letters stating that this is a venture that has the blessing of the First Lady. You recall that situation not so long ago. This has the blessing of Minister Harmon. The other is a venture that is blessed by the Prime Minister. Some other thing that has the blessing of the President. And perhaps we may need to revisit our laws to ensure that our laws are so structured to prevent and effectively penalize persons that are abusing the privileges under the law, whether it is under 3604 or under the laws that govern entities that are registered at the deeds registry. When we come back, I will conclude with some more troubling matters as it relates to NGO fraud and the like. Stay tuned.
Security Focus is brought to you by Regium International, Northwest Investment Inc., IntelliGuard Specialist Security Services, and the Institute of Security and Public Safety.
Thank you for remaining with us. Recently, I heard of a situation through a friend of mine, old friend, and he was looking for a way out. He wanted to borrow $1.5 million, and he was in prison. And I asked him, I have a sick person, what is the problem? He said this to me. He says, no, my daughter joined the church, and very shortly after she did so, they elevated her and put her on the church board. And I watched and I noticed that there were many young women, and I was happy that there were many young women elevated to positions of trust in the church and so forth. Next thing you know, the pastor went to the bank, did some documents, and had few of these young women sign their lives away. In the end, the church served the documents in the bank, and the next thing you know, the bank is looking to recover $40-something million. And we have had quite a few of those cases recently where these entities are borrowing money willy-nilly, and when the bank comes looking for their money, they cannot get the money. In fact, there was a study commissioned by the PPP government, and that study showed that NGOs have about 10 billion or somewhere in that vicinity dollars under their charge. But those monies were not being managed properly. Those assets were not being managed properly to the extent that they were able to do good things for the community. And it was alleged that simultaneous with the release of that document, some senior government officials during the PPP time advised the banks not to lend money to NGOs, because when the time came for you to recover this sum and you went to these NGOs, oftentimes you discovered it was either a shell. The persons that you dealt with could not tell you much about what was going on. The previous committee or committee members were no longer involved, and it became a very risky situation. So I'm advising all of us out there, all of you out there, all of our relatives and friends, to be very mindful of how we engage even NGOs. Try your utmost to ensure that you are not signing away your life, and you know what is the background of the entity that you are involved. I am of the view that the government needs to revisit the legislation which controls our NGOs. Perhaps that may pave the way for better governance of NGOs across our country. Thanks for listening. I am Clement Featherstone bidding you an enjoyable rest of the night. Thank you.